What would I do if I were to start over turning my son's autism symptoms around in 2024 and I look back at what worked and what didn't work? When my son was diagnosed in 2004, and I started the process in 2005 that turned his symptoms like stimming, sleepless nights, eloping, screaming, violent behavior, aggression, echolalia, nonverbal autism, sensory issues, eloping. I had to have my eyes fixated on him all the time or he would run away. So stressful. And then no sleep. Now, if I had to turn those symptoms around today, what would I do to speed up that process? So before we dive into that strategy, please subscribe to this channel, like this video so that you won't miss the next one. I promise it will be worth your time. So I'm Ninka-Bernadette Mauritson. I own BarefootAutismWarriors.com. This is where I coach moms to go through the same process that took my sons from symptoms to no symptoms. He's now independent, has a job, career, friends, and he has none of the symptoms that gave him that diagnosis back then. And I help moms do that on a daily basis. And I have worked in this field for 16 years, and I've worked with 10,000 of moms over the years, different topics, but over the years, this is my expertise. So if I were to go back to that day where I got the diagnosis and all I was longing for was to hear my child speak to me, have normal conversations, bond with my child, be able to go and see friends and family, because we couldn't, back then we had to separate the family into 2 units because we couldn't drive anywhere with him. He would tantrum or run away. And also it was quite embarrassing to go anywhere. We lost our lives and I was so afraid of his independence. I thought, what's going to happen? What's going to happen to him? I was so afraid of him never being independent. And what's going to happen to him if I die? That was my biggest fear, right? So if I were to start over, I would have not done ABA or OT or speech therapy. That was a big waste of time, and here's why. It's indoors and it's coping strategies. So those were not the strategies that turned my symptoms around. And in this video, I will tell you what did. The ABA and speech and language therapies are dealing with the symptoms, but not the root cause. Most of our children are struggling because of nature deficiency, because of mitochondrial issues, because of methylation issues, because of the wake-up call that we needed as moms that we didn't take, so that we didn't change our lives. And as an example, I'll actually get to that in the next step. But ABA is dealing with the symptoms and not the root cause. It's also indoors, and our children are desperately in need of daylight, regulating their body clocks and sleep and hydration. So nature and barefoot walking and grounding is always a big component when it comes to really seeing results fast. So spending hours indoors in front of screens and dealing with the symptoms instead of dealing with the root cause, so that the symptoms might lessen or even go away. So one of the big things that really made a change for me was to skip the therapy, the ABA-like therapy and speech and language therapy, and instead take my child out from school and only do nature therapy, walk him through the steps that I now teach other moms in nature and at home for 1 year. We didn't even do any schooling or any training or any homeschooling. We only did that and healing with the steps that I'm sharing with you in this video. And within a year, he could go back into mainstream school with his peers and complete his education. So that's number 1. Number 2, I would not have done functional medicine. The reason for that is that functional medicine comes from a really good and well-meaning place. There's a lot of really amazing functional medicine practitioners who really want to do it, make a big difference in these children's lives. The problem is that they have huge missing links and gaps in knowledge. So they are often not up to speed with the science when it comes to methylation, which impairs neurotransmitters, enzymes, and hormones. They are not up to speed when it comes to the role of the mom in the child's recovery process, because I'm going to get to that in the next step. But without that, it's just like going to the doctor. The doctor does a lot of tests that don't look at the full picture, the whole family, the spiritual aspect, the nature aspect, nature deficiency aspect, the mitochondrial aspect, not the environmental aspect, and not the bioindividual, biomedical, nutrigenomical aspect. So, functional medicine often is a place where you go and take tests, and then you're given a supplement to deal with the things that the tests show that you need. But it doesn't talk about or tell you why you're low on folate, or why you are low on copper or iron, or why your gut is impaired. So that whole approach of just giving probiotics and multivitamins and detox protocols and dealing with the symptoms, again, just like ABA, it's an outdated process, and it didn't get me anywhere. But I spent a lot of money on tests all the time, and a lot of money on supplements, trying to force my child to take these supplements, almost what's it called? Shove it down the throat, or hiding it in disgusting smoothies. It didn't give me the results, the long-term results that I was looking for. And the reason is that every child is so different that a supplement that helps one child for one issue might exacerbate the symptoms in another child. So I've created several videos and podcasts about that, and I'll link to it at the end of this video. So functional medicine, I feel, is outdated. It's about testing and giving supplements, just like allopathic medicine is testing and giving medication. It's not dealing with the root cause and the complexity of autism symptoms and ADHD symptoms. Number 3, I would have focused on me from the beginning instead of obsessing about my child's symptoms, getting rid of symptoms, fixing my child. I'll tell you why. Symptoms are messengers. Like I mentioned before, the most important component for turning my son's symptoms around was when I understood that this child is actually here to save me. This child's symptoms are here to show me what I need to change in my life. It's here to force me on my knees to a point of no return. Actually, I didn't want to live anymore at that point where the symptoms were so bad and we didn't get any sleep, and I don't know what, everything was wrong. Symptoms just consumed our lives and our nights and days. And we are forced on our knees because that is where we are actually willing to let go of the things that caused autism, to let go of the things that we need to let go of to turn something as sophisticated and complicated around as autism. Because we need to change our lives, our environment, our thoughts, the way that we parent, the way that we parent ourselves, probably the way that we live and where we live, our actions and thoughts and food, and we need to heal our trauma. And we are not willing to do that unless we're on our knees. That's why I say that I'm happy that my child got so ill that I had no choice but change my life. Because I was into television and junk food and numbing myself out, and I was 20 to 30 kilos heavier than I am now, watching crappy shows, just driving to work like a zombie, driving back, just surviving basically. And this was a massive wake-up call for me to actually understand why God sent this child to me. And it was to point me towards all the areas in life where I was living a lie, where I had abandoned myself, where I was unhealthy, unnatural, dishonest, and actually not a good parent to myself, so I couldn't be a good parent to my child. So that's number 3. And the reason why it's so effective to work on yourself as a mom is that your brain hates change. So if you're in fight and flight, if your nervous system is all whacked, which it is for all autism moms in the beginning phases of autism, if your nervous system is all whacked, your gut will be impaired, you know that. Your detoxification system will be impacted by stress and a nervous system that is out of whack. Your immune system will be impaired as well when we're in stress and have this cortisol overload. And guess what happens with our children? It's actually scientifically proven that stress leaks through the skin. They pick up on it, which means their immune system, their gut, their detoxification pathways will be impaired because of your stress. So unless you fix your stress in your body, your child will still deal with gut issues, immune issues, detoxification problems. And you can give them all the functional medicine approaches and supplements and ABA therapy. If you don't deal with that, nothing's going to change. So that's a really important thing. Number 4, I would not have done the Doman method. I would have done the brain development training that we replaced the Doman method with. Because the Doman method and neurofeedback and many of these brain training programs, they actually don't deal with the whole system, which is part of the brain that hardwires skills like social intelligence, emotional control, retention, learning, speech development, and cognitive development, and aggression, regulation of aggression. There's a part of the brain that needs stimulation for that to be developed, those skills to be developed. And those exercises are exercises like balance exercises, cross-coordination exercises, vision therapy, and auditory stimulation. But you also need to include sensory and breathing exercises, because it's a whole body and a brain inside a body. And the more impressions and the more practice the brain gets through the eyes, the ears, the skin, breath, and exercise and movement, the more accurately we can go back and mimic the development that our children, because of autism, did not complete because they were apathic or in front of a screen, or they didn't crawl for long enough, or they were in baby jumpers or baby walkers and not in nature, crawling, creeping like we're supposed to do, looking at birds at a distance, vision therapy, looking at insects close up. That's how we develop the brain, and that's what we can go back and mimic. And I would have started that sooner rather than now, when I'm teaching all the other moms that are working with me how to do that. So I would also, this is the final thing I want to share with you today. There are more things, but the final thing I want to share with you is, actually I have 2. One is Bioindividual approaches. There are 2 autism practitioners in the whole world that I would personally trust my children with. One of them is teaching inside my program, and she's the one that people go to when they've tried everything. They tried ABA, they tried the Nemetschek protocol, they tried functional medicine, they tried the GAPS diet, they tried the supplements, the MTHFR approach, and all that stuff that will not work long term. She taught me to become an expert in interpreting the language of my child's symptoms and adjust methylation, pyrrole disorder, mitochondria, gut, and a tailored nutritional approach to deal with my child's symptoms. And these needs change all the time. So if you follow a protocol and you don't know how to interpret the language of the child's symptoms and adjust nutrition and lifestyle accordingly, you'll never get there. Most practitioners don't understand methylation. They might be able to test for it, but they don't know how to balance your child's methylation, because it's not a scalable thing to learn for them. So that's something you need to learn, and nobody's teaching that except her, as far as I know. Nobody fully understands it except her, and you actually need 4 years of clinical experience only in undermethylation, overmethylation for autism and ADHD to be able to know enough about this not to do more harm than good. So if you meet a methylation expert, ask them, do you have 4 years of clinical experience only focusing on autism and ADHD, and do you have results turning symptoms around only focusing on this? Do you know how to adjust for the fact that you can't go overboard or under methylate, because methylation affects neurotransmitters, enzymes, hormones, detoxification, immune system, and DNA expression. So it's got to be an expert. And what better option than turning you into an expert, right? So that's my approach now. I wish I had that approach sooner. I wish I hadn't spent time on gene testing for diets, on testing hair mineral analysis, because that's another thing. Food intolerance tests, a waste of time, because these are not accurate. MTHFR and other gene tests to determine what supplements and diets you should be on, a waste of time. They do not show you what's actively going on in the body. Hair mineral tests can only be used for heavy metal, for getting an impression of the heavy metal toxicity in the body, nothing else. So I wish I'd saved my money on all these tests, because if you send in the same sample to 2 different labs, or even the same lab, with a week in between the postage time or whatever, you'll get different results, because you change all the time. So by the way the results hit the lab, you have already changed. So there's a lot of breakthroughs in testing that people don't know about. Final thing I would have done is I would have involved God sooner. I came to God, I came to Christ after having been in the New Age, fake, deceptive spirituality, and done homeopathy and spiritual healing and acupuncture and energy work and manifestation and all those things. And it is a way of distracting us and keeping us in an endless healing wheel that will never lead to lasting results, because it's not from God. Here's the biggest insight I've had about this. God sent a child to the world to illuminate the darkness and to save us from ourselves. Save us from our deceived, prideful, vain, and lost sinful nature. And that's how he saved us. And it's no coincidence that he sent these special children to some of us to wake us up and to save us from ourselves. And I can see that the women who lean into faith and use prayer and also the Bible in conjunction with the turnaround process, changing everything from mindset to environment, to food, to self-healing, self-parenting, to eating habits, to methylation, to gut healing, whatever it is, nothing is as quick, as fast, and as brilliant as that combination. And that's because God brings us to our knees to show us that we need him. So if we can do this by our own will, by our own talent, and by our own willpower, but it takes a long time. And that's why it took me 8 years instead of the 12 months to 14 months that it takes moms now to go through the same process with God on the side, because that's what we do in my program. So I hope that was useful. I hope that, to wrap it up, you understand that functional medicine, testing, ABA therapy, focusing on experts, focusing on the child, and trying to get rid of the symptoms when the symptoms are actually messengers who are there to change your life and save you, and not involving God, is the way forward. That's what I would have done differently if I were to start over now, and I hope you will too. If you want to learn more, check out these videos about similar topics and my approach, or go to barefootautismwarriors.com to download one of my free guides to get started today.